just got to say, Happy Father's Day. I just got to say, Happy Father's Day. And I want to say a few things about that. Father's Day weekend. Jose said, Happy Father's Day to me today. And I said, it's not Father's Day till tomorrow. And my wife quickly corrected me. She said, no, don't. You know, he wants to celebrate you, let him. Right? Women have wisdom, right?
Amen.
So,
Amen.
when I think about fathers, I think about superheroes. I think about, you know I like superheroes, right? It's no secret. I like a good Marvel movie. I like superheroes. And dads are like superheroes without capes. And leading into these thoughts from Jesus, I just wanted to maybe give you fathers and future fathers a little advice, okay? Just a little bit. Like, I'm going to give you just two pieces of advice, okay? Now, the first one, though, is just for fathers. Like, the second one is for fathers and mothers. The first one's just for fathers. Okay? So, mothers, just don't listen to this one, okay? Just don't listen to this. This is the best advice my father ever gave me about everything. And mothers, don't look. My father ever gave me was don't tell mom. Okay? Sometimes we just need to be with our children. And we just need to support them with whatever mistakes they've made. And sometimes they need to also support us in mistakes that we make. And as parents, there is this mistake that both moms and dads make, and so it's called favoritism. Now, it's really easy for me to talk about this at the moment because I have one child, right? But favoritism kind of causes these problems. Like one of the problems favoritism causes is it causes a child to think, why does dad or why does mom care so much about my sibling but not so much about me, right? And hey, like, now children, this is the part you don't listen to. The reality is there will always be favorites. And there will always be favorites just because, one, the way people are wired. People connect differently. Two, because of the level of need. Okay? And so it's interesting to me that the Apostle Paul has this to say about God. He says that God does not what? He does not show favoritism. And this is from Romans 2:11. God does not show favoritism. Now that's interesting because Jesus had come out of the wilderness and he had fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and he had not drank any water or ate any bread in 40 days or 40 nights. And the temptation of Satan to Jesus kept going like, God has given you favoritism. God has given you power. You don't need to be thirsty. You don't need to be hungry. Just go ahead. Turn these stones like into bread. But he refused to give himself absolutely any privilege, to use any power for any privilege. So then the very next thing that happens when he comes out of the wilderness in Luke 4, the very next thing that happens is he begins to preach in the synagogues in the neighborhood. And on this particular Sabbath in Luke 4, and it is a Sabbath that this takes place in Luke 4 on, Jesus is in the synagogue that he grew up in. He is in the synagogue where he learned his first Bible stories. He is in the synagogue where he had a Sabbath school teacher who taught him to sing songs. He is in the synagogue where the elders at the back are people who raised his family. And they look to Jesus and they say, he's a new rabbi. Let him speak today. And they hand Jesus a scroll. And the scroll they hand Jesus comes from the prophet Isaiah. And here's the story for us. We're picking it up in verse 16. It says in verse 16 that he came to Nazareth where he had been what? Brought up. And as was what? His custom, he went where? To the synagogue when? On Sabbath. So he is in his custom, he is in his practice, he is keeping Sabbath like a good Sabbath keeper, he's going to synagogue like a good Sabbath keeper, and he's going to synagogue in his hometown, and he stood to read, right? He stood to read, and here's the deal. The scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him, and he unrolled the scroll, and he found the place where this was written. Okay, so the thing is, he did not allow God to show him favoritism in the desert. He comes out of the desert, he begins preaching, he shows up at his home synagogue, and they're like, that's Jesus, and we know he's a rabbi now. Let him read. And they randomly hand him the scroll for that day, just like the Sabbath school lesson. It's pre-picked. And he opens the scroll, and the scroll is the prophecy that Isaiah wrote about the coming Messiah and what he would be like. And so there Jesus is in front of his Sabbath school teacher. There Jesus is in front of his brothers. There Jesus is in front of the elders who kept him in line. There Jesus is in front of people who have been a part of his whole life. And he picks up the scroll of Isaiah and he begins to read the announcement of God's favor. And here's what he begins to talk about. The favor of God will be his template for ministry. Okay? The favor of God will become his template. It's his announcement that he's Messiah. It's his announcement that he is God. And his favoritism is not like the favoritism that fathers sometimes have for maybe their eldest son. His favoritism is not like the favoritism that maybe sometimes mothers have for their youngest girl. His favoritism is not based on who he likes more or loves more. It's based on who needs love more. And he begins to talk about this, and what we're going to find out is, like children, we tend to get jealous when a father figure or a mother figure or a parental figure shows favoritism to one group over another. Children are like concerned about what is fair, right? So if you give one child a toy and you give another child a piece of salary, what do you think one child is going to say? Children are always concerned about, are they being treated fair? But Jesus isn't concerned about fairness at all. It's actually not something Jesus is concerned about. In Christians who are concerned about fairness, we're going to look and see what Jesus says about that. Because Jesus isn't concerned about fair. Jesus is concerned about making favor or giving privilege to those who don't have it. And by definition, that is not fair, but it's righteous. And that, by definition, is called grace. And that, by definition, is called mercy. And that is what Jesus establishes his whole ministry on. It's very important at this time in our existence, we, the Christian church, do not get this idea wrong. Jesus has not come to treat us fair, because if Jesus treated me fair, what I deserve is not good. Is there anyone who could be bold enough to say, I want what's fair to God? I want you to think about that before you answer it. Because if God was fair, what I deserve is not good. But Jesus doesn't show favoritism like humans. His favor is not about who gets what. His favor is about who needs what. And so Jesus says things like, do you think that I have come for those who are not sick? I have not come for those who are not sick. I have come for those who are sick. Jesus gives his attention to those who have need, not just to those who have want. And it's a pretty important idea, because at this juncture of our time, we are dealing with situations where people are using our Bible to defend the fair treatment of everybody, which ends up as the oppression of those who need favor. And as Christians, where are we going to stand on this issue? Jesus didn't come to just be fair. He came to give an advantage to those who need it. The Spirit of the Lord is what? Where? Upon me. This is what Jesus said. The Spirit of the Lord is where? Upon me. Because he has what? Anointed me. Who knows what he's talking about? He's saying God has made me king. He has just declared in his home synagogue that he is Christ. He has just openly declared in the open air among the ladies who rocked him in cradle roll, I am Messiah. And this is what my mission is going to be as Messiah. My mission as Messiah is going to be to proclaim good news equally for everyone. That's not what he said. To who? The poor. You know what Jesus said about fairness? He said, don't bother giving things to people who don't want it. He said, why cast your pearls among swine? Jesus is concerned about giving favor, not to who wants it, but to who needs it. Our understanding needs to be, we need the favor of God. And if we need the favor of God, we must be willing to give that favor of God to people who need it even more than us. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, he says. I have been anointed. I have been made Christ. I have been made king. I have been made the rightful arbitrator of the riches of God. And I didn't come to give it to the Pharisees. I didn't come to give it to the Sadducees. I didn't come to give it to anyone but the poor. I came to give it to those who know they have need. And if they know they have need, then that's who I've come to give it to them. He goes on to say, he has sent me to proclaim what? Liberty. To who? The captives. What's liberty? Freedom. I have come to give to the poor. I have come to give freedom to the oppressed. I have come to take people out of cages, not put them in cages. I have come to give people what they don't deserve, not what they deserve. I have come to proclaim liberty to the captives and to recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty what? Who? Who? No. They got to get in line and do it the right way. Come on now. They got to follow law and order. Come on now. God has empowered our government to protect us, not other people. That's not the gospel. That's not the gospel. That's not the gospel. That's draconian language. The gospel is Jesus has come to show favor. Jesus has come to show mercy. Jesus has come to give liberty to anyone who knows they need it. Because we are all being oppressed. And we cannot want to be lifted out of our oppression while openly supporting the oppression of others. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a right way to do things, but I am saying never let Christians be on the side of using the Word of God to preach directly against the proclamation that Jesus made when He declared Himself anointed by God to be Messiah. How could the church ever end up using current situations in opposition to the very reason Jesus said He came to this world? Yes, there's a pattern. Yes, there's a way. Yes, there needs to be order. But let's act with the Spirit of Him who came to give what? Liberty. To who? Those who are oppressed. Now, you might have one responsibility as a citizen of wherever you're from, but you also have a responsibility as a citizen of this kingdom. And this is the kingdom that's going to last, by the way. You want a constitution that's never going away, it's this one. Jesus has come to give liberty to all who are oppressed. Now, people are oppressed in different ways. People have different kinds of oppression. But here's what Jesus is saying to however they are oppressed. He has come to proclaim the year of what? The Lord's favor. You know what that means? The year, it doesn't mean like 365 days here. They only had 360 days in the year back then, actually. What it actually means is the time, the hour, the moment of God's favor. He's saying the fact that I am Messiah means those who are oppressed should get favor. That's what I came to do. Now, I don't have the ability to give everybody everything what they need right away. But that should not make me say, I don't care. That should not make me look the other way. It's okay for me to weep that I can't help somebody. It's not okay for me to accept and justify that. I don't have a problem with saying, I don't have the resources to help you, but I care. And I would if I did. But I do have a problem with trying to use the Bible and the gospel to defend not wanting to. That is different. But you know what? We just need to decide whose mission we're on. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to keep becoming more and more pronounced. We're either going to need to become more like Jesus or less like Jesus. And it's an individual decision how we feel about these issues. But I can only tell you the scripture that Jesus used to declare himself your king. And when he declared himself your king, he was declaring how his kingdom, which you are a citizen of, operates. In the values it holds. But I can also tell you this. This is what happened to Jesus. He rolled up that scroll and he put it down and then he said, today, this way, this method of living has begun. And those elders, those cradle roll teachers who had rocked him, they stood up and they yelled at him and they attacked him. And look, I'm not going to exaggerate it. Look what it says right here in verse 29 they did. They chased this Jesus out of the church and they drove him where? Out of town. And brought him to the brow of where? The hill on which their town was built, so that they could do what? Throw him off the cliff. I don't know. This was his church. I'm a little scared. I just proclaimed his words. And when he did it, his church ran him out the door, ran him out the town, and tried to run him off the cliff. And you haven't even known me since I was a baby. When we are about the proclamation of Jesus Christ as our Messiah in the world, expect people not to get it. Expect people to try to run you out of town. Expect people to say, you don't have the right to say that. But there comes a point, church, that I care what you think of me. But I don't care enough to have Jesus think wrong about me. There comes a point where I want to be fair to everyone, but I must be like Jesus and show the favor to those who need it. And it's not because I love those any less who don't need the favor, but it's because I must go to those who need the favor. Because that's what Jesus did. It reminds me of a story about Jeremiah and Jackie, who grew up always at each other's throat. Dad, which often happens, was more affectionate to his little girl. I mean, it's where we get this saying, right? Daddy's little girl, mommy's little boy. If you ask Jose, he's a mommy's boy. He didn't appreciate me calling him out, but he knows it's true. That's why he's hiding. But Jackie was Daddy's little girl. And Daddy always showed her favor. Always showed her favor. It didn't mean he didn't love Jeremiah. He loved Jeremiah as much as he loved Jackie, but he always showed favor to Jackie. And this continued throughout their whole time growing up. Their whole life. Jackie got the car for prom. Jeremiah got the skateboard. Jackie got new clothes. Jeremiah got used clothes. Jeremiah would say, Dad, it's not fair. I came first. And Jackie would say, yeah, they made all the mistakes with you. They're just getting it right with me. Let's face it. When people show favoritism to us, we like it. The problem was, there came a day when the favoritism ended. There came a day when Dad never again showed favor to Jackie. And the reason is Jeremiah didn't come home. Jeremiah died in a car accident. And afterwards, Jackie was like crying to her dad that it's not fair. And she was like overwhelmed with guilt because she had her dad's favor. And there she was crying in her dad's arms that night. And she said to her dad, I will never be able to tell him I am sorry. He used to get so mad that I would rub it in. And her dad took her face in his hands and he wiped her tears away. And he said, yes, Jeremiah used to get so mad. He used to be so hurt that he came first, but you got everything first. That was when he was a kid. But when Jeremiah was a man, he came to me and he said, I'm glad. Don't ever tell Jackie that I really got the favoritism, because you knew I didn't need all the help she did. And I couldn't understand it when you weren't being fair. But you gave me favoritism. You gave her favoritism because I didn't need it. That is Christian maturity. Christian maturity is when we understand that there are people in this world who need the favor more than us. It doesn't mean that we always have it to give, but it does mean that we don't demand our entitlements. My only entitlement is the cross. And the only thing owed to me is death. And in that I have more richness than anything in this world. If I want to be a king, let me live like a king. And let me show favor, because I'm mature enough to see there are people who need it more than me. Marvin, lead us.
Marvelous grace of our loving Lord, grace that extends our sin and our guilt. Yonder on Calvary found our Lord, there the blood of the Lamb was spilled. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse freely. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all our sin.
I want to live a life of receiving God's grace. I want to live a life that I don't deserve. I want to live a life that I'm not entitled to. Because what I deserve and what I'm entitled to is death. And I want to live every moment of this coming week inside this grace. This marvelous grace. I want to live a life that I don't deserve. I want to live a life that's better than I deserve. I want to live a life that God loves me enough to show favor to me. Not because I've earned it, but just because He knows I need it. To do that, I must live a life this week of giving merit that other people don't deserve, of giving favor to people they have not earned, of extending mercy to people sometimes who don't even know their need. Because I once lived not even knowing my need. Grace, grace, God's grace. If you want to live it, you've got to give it. Grace can only be held on to when you give it to others. This week, receive the grace of God. This week, receive the grace of God in your heart. This week, stop thinking about what you are entitled to or you've earned, because that's not as good as you think it is. Ask God, what has He given you to give to others? Marvin, give us a little.
Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse within. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all our sin.
Dear Heavenly Father, I don't deserve anything but what Jesus took for me. I don't deserve anything but to be beaten for your cause. I don't deserve anything but to be spat on for your cause. I don't deserve anything but to have my brow ripped apart by the thorns of greed of this world. I don't deserve anything but crucifixion and shame exposed on a cross to the world. But grace, grace. I have an elder brother named Jesus, whom you treated unfair. You treated him unfair, that I may know favor. He took my sin. He was in prison to set me free. Thank you for having favor on the weak, for I am weak. Help me to extend favor to those who are weak, for I have found it because you were not fair to Jesus, but showed favor to me. May someone be moved to baptism today because of that. May someone be moved to rededicating their life to God because of that. May someone get it, Father, like they've never got it before, because you were unfair to Jesus for our favor. We praise you in His name. Amen.
Sing hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.